Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Deconversionists. So glad to be with you tonight with my co-host, Elliott, and of course, myself, the Unraveler. It's good to be with you guys, and we hope that we get some callers tonight, some people to hop in the room and have a chat with us, because tonight's conversation is an interesting one. Faith makes friendships fickle. You know what? I was thinking about this a lot this week, and I think I've realized faith makes everything questionable, actually. Everything you believe is questionable if you begin with a place of faith. I was thinking, like, even outside of friendships, just starting the conversation here, Elliott. When I was talking about myself in the past about, when I was a Christian growing up, thinking about how the world really worked was not important. She didn't learn science because science was just out to get God. And so you filtered, I think most Christians do this. You filter everything about the world through the lens of faith. And I don't want to just say God, but faith in general, because as we know, everybody has their own definition of God. Everybody understands him differently. It's whatever you have faith in, that you've pretty much chosen the God you wanted. And so everything in life that you've come to believe is questionable, because when that faith is challenged, the answer is never, maybe I shouldn't believe in God anymore. It's, well, that must be wrong, no matter how much evidence there is. Because if it speaks against God, then that's impossible. God's always the right answer. So you default to whatever it is your faith is in without any substantial reason, without any justification. You've just come to believe it, and everything else that you probably should believe, because there's sufficient evidence for, you poo-poo and reject because it goes against something you've already concocted or have been brainwashed to believe. So I'll just leave that there for a second and let you jump in before I take up the whole show talking. Save everybody from me, man.
Well, I have been pretty quiet, so maybe, yeah. So when you say faith, are you talking about faith itself, or are you talking about the bigger picture, like the community or the religion or Christianity itself, or the church, or do you mean like the actual definition of faith itself? Because
I'm talking about faith itself.
Okay.
And the way I define it, it's drawing conclusions without sufficient justification, a method of drawing conclusions without sufficient justification. Yeah.
Okay. I guess if using your framing, I wouldn't necessarily say faith. Like the title of the topic is "Faith Makes Friendships Fickle." Is it? I would say Christianity makes friendships fickle, and I would also say, when you say fickle, could you make a synonym like disposable? Like Christianity makes friendships disposable. Like, are we talking about people that like stop being our friends and distance themselves from us once we leave the faith?
Yeah, maybe some synonyms. I was just looking for alliteration. So fickle seemed to work with what I was talking about. But fickle's a good word. But aside from that, other words maybe like uncertain. Maybe to use the word faith again in the sentence, I would say faith-driven. And by that, I mean that. So you said you would think in terms of Christianity. I would think in terms of pretty much any religion. They all tend to do the same thing.
Well, I mean, the group you're a part of, like you're a Christian, and being a Christian, there's a lot of different connotations on that.
So if the way Christianity works, it's certainly if you follow like the scriptural teaching about chastising somebody who turns away from the Lord, like Matthew 16 or Matthew, was it 18 or 16? I can't remember. I think it's 16. Where, you're supposed to go, go to them one-on-one. If they don't listen to you, you take somebody else with you, 2 or 3 others, and then you take them to the elders. If they don't listen, then the whole church just rejects you, and you get cut off from the Lord's Supper, and you're supposed to be treated like a pagan and a tax collector, and this whole thing. So if you do all that, then, the religion itself, it functions very much like a cult, where when you decide not to believe anymore, or adhere to the religion itself, you get rejected. Your whole family, your friends, everybody's supposed to turn their back on you, because in theory, that's supposed to make you want to come back. I don't see how that ever actually works. I mean, other
So
than
religion,
you're not coming back.
the
You're
religion
not coming
itself,
back because you want. Sorry.
the religion itself requires you to do that. It requires you to make friendships disposable once people leave the faith.
Yeah, in theory, of course, there are many people who would say, "Well, we don't apply that text, or we interpret it differently," and so there would be a lot that wouldn't do that, and they would say, "No, no, no, you still love them no matter what." So you do have that as well. So the religion itself will affect it, though, over the course of time, because let's say as an atheist, you continue to practice Christianity, but bring in your views and constantly challenge what's being taught in your Sunday school or whatever. You're eventually going to be spoken to and told you're not being humble, or you need to quiet down, or you need to stop causing waves. You don't really have the freedom to bring challenges and ask genuine questions that require support to defend their position. Once you go against what their particular denomination teaches, you're going to be kind of pushed aside and shunned, and at least pressured to shut up. So you don't really get that strong fellowship anymore like you had before. Now you have to just kind of measle around and be quiet. So there are consequences, obviously, from the religion itself because of what it costs. But what I'm thinking of is the individual's faith, the drawing of a conclusion without sufficient justification, what people do when they believe things. That, of course, spills over into whatever religion you believe and whatever denomination you believe and whatever group of that denomination you're a part of, because you're filtering all of your own beliefs through your faith, whatever it is you want, your religion to be, whatever you want your God to be, and then those who have the closest association with that, you're gonna find yourself in cahoots with them. Once you start straying from that, you tend to have dissension there. You end up making new friends. I can tell you this, even before I became an atheist, just as a Christian, how many times I lost friends or had to leave a church or had to no longer be a part of a small group or couldn't teach anymore simply because I changed my view within Christianity. I just, like, for example, my view of the end times when I became a full preterist, that was like a no-no, and I got booted from that church. In another church, it might have been okay, but in this particular church, it wasn't. So sure, your beliefs are going to be affected. But when you go back just to the individual level, I think one of the things that faith does is because it is driven to defend your position at all costs, even when it's indefensible. You and I have watched plenty of debate shows. In fact, we do this right here on a weekly basis when people call in. And we know that they don't have a justification for their faith. They don't have a defense. It's usually stories, or what do you call it? What do you call stories? For some reason,
Personal experience.
Yeah, personal experience. The words evading me that I was trying to. Testimony. Yeah, no, there's another word I was thinking about, but anyway, that's the category. Yeah, but that's usually what it comes down to. And then, of course, there's this pseudo evidence, the testimonies from the apostles from 2,000 years ago, and it's like they're just swimming to save their life, just trying to grab anything they can to make some sort of defense for what they already believe to be true. We know that's what apologetics does. Apologetics is not a reason anybody ever actually becomes a Christian. You're usually a Christian way before apologetics, and then you find a reason to continue to support the belief that you have, right, because it really doesn't have any support. So what ends up happening is you're defending this position at all costs, and there's a great fear that if this isn't true, what does that mean for my worldview? What does that mean for my life? What does that mean for my beliefs, my morals, my values? Like, it affects everything. Right. So it's a very scary place to be, to have to question that which you have faith in. And so because of that, there tends to be, and at least it was for me and most of the people I flocked together with in Christianity, there tends to be always an ulterior motive. Maybe I should say ulterior is a good word, but a primary motive above just being friends with somebody. When you're a Christian, there's always, I'm doing this for the glory of God. There's always I have to save this person. I have to correct people when they're not living righteously. I have to correct myself when I'm not living righteously. I have to, and it's always about God. It's never about the friend. And so if the Bible teaches that this person is living in sin, you have to confront them because that's what the Bible teaches.
Right.
So that's what I mean when I say faith makes friendships fickle, because you rarely ever are you within a church context become friends with people, or even trying to get people to come to church. Do you become friends with them just because you become friends? There's that alternative and ulterior motive that this has to be Christ-centered and it has to, fit eternity. And if you leave the faith, well, you're just not going in the same direction I am anymore. So it does affect it. And that's what I mean by fickle. It's not a solid base for the friendship.
Yeah.
It's something else that's driving it.
And it can also destroy pre-existing friendships that go way back. Not just you making false friendships to pull people into the religion. And another thing worth noting is that it's not just faith in a religious context that makes friendships fickle, but faith exists in other contexts as well that can damage friendships. I'll give you an example. I lost my best friend after he got out of drug rehab. Now, we went way back for years. We were best friends. We even were roommates for a while. And over time, he developed a drug addiction that lasted for years. And eventually it got worse to the point where he got hit rock bottom and had to go to rehab. So he gets out of rehab and we connect. And I had him come down to visit me. And he told me about his experience in rehab, stayed with me for a few days, and he basically had gotten saved, had hit rock bottom, found Jesus, went through that whole experience. But he also joined Addicts Anonymous. So if anybody's familiar with the AA programs, they are faith-based programs. And one of the things that they recommend or pressure or require you to do is to cut off old friendships that might be detrimental to your continued progress out of addiction or alcoholism. Now, in some weird way, I got lumped in with those negative past associations, even though I had nothing to do with his drug addiction whatsoever. He wasn't cutting me off because I was going to drag him back into addiction or tell him he needs to go back to using drugs or in some way being associated with his old lifestyle. He cut me off through Addicts Anonymous recommendation, as far as I can tell, only because I was an atheist. And for him to be that new creation in Christ and free of addiction, he had to sever ties with anything negative from his past. And so I got axed, and I never talked to him again. I didn't stop being his friend; he stopped being mine, and it was 100% a faith-based decision on his part. Honestly, pretty fucked up. And the excuse he gave me was he quoted that verse that you had already referenced about not associating with apostates. And I thought he was joking. But he told me at one point, he's like, I'm not even supposed to have dinner with you. I'm not even supposed to break bread with you or share a table because you're an apostate and you walked away from the faith. Now, I don't know how committed of a Christian he was at this point, how extreme his life-changing experience was. But between the two, between the conversion experience and the AA experience, both faith-based, I got cut off for absolutely no good reason whatsoever. And it really hurt for a long time. Because and he didn't even tell me directly why. He just blocked my number, unfriended me on Facebook, and wouldn't respond. I'm like, what the fuck? And I had to hear from a third party the reasons why. So yeah, it's not just religion that turns your friendships fickle through faith, but it's other quasi belief systems as well.
Yeah, no, you make a good point.
Common denominator.
Faith is the common denominator. Yes, I see what you're saying, because even those I've become friends with or have been friends with that have left what you would call Christianity, they haven't quite broken all of the faith the method of faith completely in the way they've drawn conclusions. So that has cost me some friendships as well, just for providing evidence and defending things like human rights or whatever. So yeah, I mean, you're onto something there. It's definitely faith sucks. It's utterly useless to anything in life, and yet has probably the greatest hold on us that any other addiction possibly could. It is just absolutely crazy.
And as a side point, like I was thinking about this week, that this concept of having a life-changing experience with Jesus at rock bottom, like my friend did, when people find faith. People that hit rock bottom and accept Jesus and have this powerful experience, when they often are at rock bottom, they are drug addicts, and oftentimes they are prisoners who have committed serious crimes. And it's ironic to me that they find Jesus in that state of mind when they're at a time in their life when they probably have done the most amount of wrong to other people or to society at large. And suddenly they find Jesus, and Jesus forgives them of everything and makes them a new creation and absolves them of their sins. How am I supposed to tell the difference between somebody who refuses to take responsibility for any of their actions and someone who has actually accepted Jesus and been forgiven? Because the coincidence of this happening to people that are at rock bottom and have done the most amount of wrong in their lives to other people, and then suddenly they no longer have to be responsible for it simply by accepting Jesus' pardon, kind of conflicts with common sense a little bit. Like, maybe Jesus is a way to avoid taking any responsibility for your own actions. How convenient.
You're absolutely right. Dude, you're so on point. That's why in my book I argue that becoming a Christian, for those who didn't necessarily grow up in it, it's just trading one addiction for another. Like, typically you're in trouble, tension, or transition because of something you're doing in your life that's destroying you. And so Jesus is supposedly the solution to all of it. And in fact, it's nothing more than an addiction to no longer feeling guilt or whatever it may be that the excuse is. But it's amazing. Like, I have met child molesters that are on the list, of the pedophile list, but they've turned to Jesus now,
right?
And so that's their sins have been forgiven, and that's just okay. And now they have a community, and it's fine. I mean, I know people fuck up in life, and so they have to live anyway somehow. But to justify it in a sense that, well, it's forgiven. I don't have to, it's redeemed. It's like I never did it. You did.
Well,
you don't get to.
There's nothing wrong with second chances. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about people that are in any other definition, they're bad people. And then all of a sudden they find Jesus, and now they don't have to take responsibility anymore at all. And it's interesting that this finding Jesus at rock bottom, or Jesus changing their life completely, or you being a new man in Christ and becoming a Christian, that rarely happens to normal average people that are like medium successful in life and are living a normal life. That happens to people who have really fucked up and hurt a lot of people. And they even admit that they've hurt a lot of people. But then in the same sentence, it's, but Jesus forgave me. Like, it rarely happens to somebody who doesn't have anything really to forgive. He hasn't shot somebody or stabbed somebody or done a bunch of drugs for the last 10 years and found himself on Skid Row and like stole from his relatives and it ended up in rehab with a lot of amends to make. No, it happens to the guy that did all those things. And it's like, then Jesus found me in the pits of despair, and he forgave me and raised me up. Like, oh, no shit. Well, great, good for you. Now you don't have to make any amends. Now you don't have to be responsible whatsoever. You're all good. You're clean. It's white. You got a pardon. Fuck you. Honestly, man, fuck you.
Right.
This is such bull.
Yeah, those are the easiest ones to target, and those are the ones that fill. You can fill a bunch of seats in your church with those kind of people, because they're just looking for some sort of redemption, or somebody to overlook what they've done or whatever. So, But the other kind, you're talking about where, they haven't gone around committing a bunch of atrocities, and they don't really need forgiveness, but you convince them that they're a sinner, and now they have a problem that they need solved. Sin is such a stupid concept. It's amazing what is being defined as sin. It's like, have you ever disobeyed your mom? That's a sin. You need Jesus. It's
Right.
like, seriously. But that's like I remember when I was at least in my teens, I remember I was so passionate about outreach, and I recall so desperately trying to convince my friends to become Christians because it was so important that they went to heaven. My concern wasn't, hey, what can I do to care for this person more or build a stronger relationship or listen to what their thoughts are. It didn't matter. All that mattered was, how can I convince them that they're bad enough of a sinner that they'll turn to Jesus and come to church with me? It's like, that's sick, dude. You were talking earlier about people from our past that turned away. I got a message, a private message from one of my close friends when I was a Christian, when I was a pastor, and it's interesting because I'm going to read this message. I'm not going to say who it is, but I'll read the message. But it's fascinating that it doesn't matter. Like when I was a Christian and I was a full preterist, these friends of mine that I made at the church or whatever, they came to the church and they stuck because they loved the message I was teaching. They were like, "Wow, this makes so much sense. You have so much understanding of the Bible. You defend your position so well, And then you become an atheist and you start presenting evidence for why none of that was true. And we don't think you're that intelligent anymore. You're just a false teacher leading people astray and taking them to hell now. There's no middle ground. So, I read this in my message. You were once a very good leader among those seeking a true life, knowing Christ and acknowledging his purpose as God's visual and human presence in our lives. You are now a much greater disappointment as a false prophet for those who could be saved and now opt to follow you out of heaven's glory. Congratulations on your achievement." Really? I mean, like, okay, you won't read my book. You won't interact with me. You'll just shoot me some message like that. And it's frustrating. Let's not contend with the evidence because, that will make you have to, consider whether or not your position is actually valid. But as long as you have faith, that's all that matters. And that's what I mean when I say faith makes friendships fickle. It's like you're the friend until that person leaves your concept of faith.
Right. And it really pisses me off because there's no call for it, really. I think they're exposing themselves as I don't know, like disingenuous people at heart. It's hard for me to imagine that a person who was genuine and was acting in good faith and did actually want to be friends with you, whatever the context, whether it's because you were part of the same church or not. Like, it's hard for me to imagine that an honest person would stoop to those depths to write you off as soon as you change the way that you thought about God. Like, it's almost like it exposes them as being bad people to begin with. I don't know if that's the case or if it's religion that's doing it to them. Like, is religion poisoning otherwise good people, or are these bad people attracted to it? I wish I could tell the difference, because it would have helped a lot when I was in church if I could have spotted the disingenuous fuck who would write me off in a heartbeat but pretends to be my friend versus the person that actually does care about me and we're just here because of a shared interest. I wish I knew the difference, but I can't tell the difference because they all write me off when I leave the religion. And so I don't know if you've experienced this on social media, but I have for years now. But I'll have discussions with people in some kind of context, whether it's a public dialogue or whether it's on a mutual friends page. And I will have somebody private message me that I do not know, and they'll want to have a conversation. And I've had countless of these encounters, and it's like they see me as prey to proselytize without knowing my story. But they initially pretend to be my friend, and they want to have a conversation as friends. And so we get into it, and we go back and forth for a while, sometimes for a very long time. And when they find out, like, my story and my knowledge base of these things, very quickly they start to distance themselves, and oftentimes just like will randomly, they'll either randomly block me, or they'll disappear, or they'll suddenly just cook off in a series of insults and then block me. But I have kept like none of these conversations as actual friendships. They've all ended. And most recently, one did about 2 months ago. I went back and forth with this guy for months, and he had started the conversation with the assumption that I knew nothing about Christianity, and I just had honest questions. And it felt so fucking manipulative, but I played it out anyway. To the point where I invited him on the show, and I sent him clips from our podcast, and he didn't watch any of them, and he obviously hasn't shown up. And then it's been probably 2 solid months since his last reply, but he pretended to be my friend. Like, if you want to talk about faith making friendships fickle, like, this is exactly what we're talking about, is disingenuous, scummy characters who should know better, who should be interacting on a genuine human level, but they are not, because their religion is compelling them to play these fucking mind games.
So to answer one of your questions from earlier, I think religion turns good people bad. Because I would consider myself a person who was genuinely, I'm a good person. I think of myself that way. But while I was a Christian, that was my mindset. I always had that prey drive. It was always that ulterior motive that you were just talking about. And, you know, when you get to a point where you just can't convince someone anymore, and they're just going to continue maintaining their atheism, you just kind of drift away from them, because they're not going to be your target audience anymore, because you can't get them to church. It's just not going to work. But yeah, to your point, I had a lot of the friends that I thought were still my friends after I left Christianity and became an atheist. We talked a little bit for a while, but there was always that conversation about Jesus and why I left. And after a while, that the friendship just disappears, because you no longer have that commonality. You're not going to their church anymore. You're not talking about Jesus. You're not praising Jesus. You're actually degrading Jesus because you think he's an asshole. And I'm sorry, I can't help it, because he is. If you just read the Bible, the whole Bible is a slave sex manual. You know, it's terrible. But yeah, it's frustrating to think you're having genuine conversations now that I'm on this side of it with a Christian, only to realize that there was the ulterior motive of just trying to make you a Christian again. And, you know, the thing is that, like, don't get me wrong, I'm also wanting to help them see that that faith is a farce and you shouldn't use it, and that there's evidence in not having faith and living, you know, using the scientific method. But it's for some reason, it's like, it's impossible. I see you, Zonios Quo. 1 second. And by the way, make sure you're in the camera. We need to make sure we can have a face-to-face with whoever we talk to on the show. So make sure you pop yourself in the camera. And as soon as you do, not just a hand, we need to see your face. It's kind of one of our rules on this show. We have other shows that we do on Skeptic Haven that do not require face-to-face, that you can call into on the phone. But here we want to talk face-to-face. So make sure you're in the camera. And then as soon as I see you, I'll bring you in.
And that's not necessarily Ellen's rule, but that is mine. Like, I want to have a personal conversation. I don't want to have I'm talking to a random screen or a avatar. Yeah.
So we just want to make sure you're a real
helps
person.
Cut down on the possibility of trolls, because we don't screen these calls. So
reality is we have actually tried too many times and have been burned. I still can't believe that one guy from India, I think it was, the whole thing was a link, or what do you call it? Not a link. Man, my brain's not working tonight. Whatever. He was when something repeats, like the same clip repeats over and over again. No, well, I mean, yeah, there's a term for that. Somebody in the audience, somebody in the comments, please help. I can't think of the freaking word.
Well, if you could use some more synonyms, maybe I could figure it out.
Yeah. Well, those were the synonyms. Okay. But when on a loop.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
There we go. Okay.
That's why I couldn't fucking think of it. But yeah, so somebody just said it with me. Yes. Thank you. So a loop. Yes. Anyway, I'll just pause on what I was saying. But tonight we are talking about faith making friendships fickle, and we have a guest. I'm going to bring him in. Zonios quo. I'm saying that correctly? Can you pronounce your name for us?
Yeah, it's Zonius. I'm not too keen on having my face on like all online, but
that's all right. You're doing fine so far. So just don't think about it.
You look great. That matters. You're good.
Oh, appreciate.
I mean, you can see us, so we're both on an even playing field here, and I know that we're not much to look at.
Y'all are fine. It's just, yeah.
So anyway, thanks for coming on. If you've been listening for a while, are you familiar with our topic tonight?
Not too familiar with. Well, I saw the topic, just faith making friendships fickle.
Yeah.
And so, I'm guessing I will just popped in literally just a second ago. So I'm guessing you're saying that having or holding to a religious faith makes your friendships not as deep as they possibly could be.
So I guess to kind of to catch you up on it, we're kind of making the case that a lot of friendships within religion are not genuine. Like people befriend other people to bring them to church and try to get them saved, but they don't actually care about the person necessarily. So that when people like us, myself and Ellen, when we walk away from the faith and we stop believing, all those friendships that we had before, those people cut us off. They stopped being friends with us. They abandoned us because our friendship was only based on the shared faith. And I think that kind of makes you a worse person as a Christian to see people as like objects of conversion or partners in Christ rather than actual friends.
Before we continue, somebody in the chat just asked a good question, and it might set the tone some more. What does faith mean? It's good. I'll just define it. My definition, the way I define faith, is it's a method of drawing conclusions without sufficient justification. A method of drawing conclusions without sufficient justification. That's what I think faith is. Or if you prefer Matt Dillahunty's definition, faith is the excuse people give when they don't have a good reason. So whichever way you want to go with that, they're both saying about the same thing. But that's what we mean by faith. Anyway, Zonius, go ahead and back and respond to Elliott if you'd like.
Well, what I would just say faith is probably just I would say faith is like the religious rites or beliefs that a person holds on to. That would pretty much just be my or their epistemological commitments to a higher power than themselves.
Yes, and that's a fine definition with the caveat of without a good reason, I would say.
I would disagree. But
well, that's okay. Let's talk about that for just a second then. What reason would you give? What convinced you of your faith or that God exists?
I think it's less about what convinced me initially rather than what maintains my commitment. Because what initially had gotten me into the faith was just mainly the fruits of the people that I saw around me, and an investigation on just the resurrection itself. Now, albeit that it was it itself, after going through my own deconstruction journey, after that it was kind of like a fickle. It was fickle in itself. Like it wasn't as deep as I thought it to be, but at the time it was something that was convincing enough for me to want to commit to it. And as I've followed through in that commitment, I found stronger reasons in order to stay in the faith.
So maybe it would help if we asked some clarifying questions, because obviously we don't know anything about you. Are you a current Christian?
I am, yes.
Okay. And what sort of Christian would you classify yourself as?
I guess I'd say I align most with Baptists.
Okay. And How long have you been a Christian?
I've been a Christian. I'd say I've been a Christian since 2017, so that's been about 9 years.
So when you mentioned your deconstruction journey, were you a Christian for a time and deconstructed and then came back to the faith?
Yeah, I could confidently say there was a period in my life where I just it was very hard for me to see like if there was any truth in any religious claim that could be made. Partially it was just in my study of just like the history of religion, and also like the evolutionary aspects of religion itself. So I'd say, yeah.
So when you mentioned your deconstruction journey, like I guess I'm kind of confused on what you mean by that, because you're currently a Christian. Usually when people use that term, they mean they left the faith.
Yeah. So even though I had withheld commitment, it wasn't like I had taken a pause on like reading my Bible, I'd taken a pause on listening to Christian content, started listening to more deconstructionists, seeing the validity in some arguments against God as well, and started agreeing with them internally.
So
and even I talked to people who went to my church, and even like my family members who also believe, and yeah, it was they were well aware of where I was at when it came to faith.
Okay. So if I were a perfect stranger and I came up to you on the street and I said, "Hey man, I hear you're a Christian. Why are you a Christian?" Like what would you respond with?
If you came to me and asked me why I'm a Christian, I would just say it's mainly the person of Christ. I see Christ as being worthy of being followed, and not only that, I believe that the claim of that there is a God is true, and yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay. So now let's say I come up to you on the street as a perfect stranger and I say, "How did you become a Christian?" Now, how would you respond?
Oh, I just tell them it's a long story. I would tell them that I was introduced to faith, my faith as a kid. My mom and dad did not disagree on their religious views. So at first they did not teach me and my younger brother any sort of like actual doctrine or anything. And we didn't go to church or anything. But once I moved in with my mom, after my mom and dad separated, my mom had me and my younger brother go to church. And that was whenever I first had my experience in church. My first sermon that I ever heard was actually on hell, and that scared the mess out of me. And I was like, I think I was like 9 or 10 years old at that point, and it made me angry because they made me do something that I didn't want to do. Like they walked me through the Lord's Prayer, and I didn't like that as a kid because it was something that I didn't want to do. The whole idea was scary to me. And so, yeah, I grew up a lot of my life just doing what I wanted to do. And it was one time where I got alone with a group that was with Johnson University, which is like a Christian college, but they were like doing a camp for a scholarship and a stipend. And that came whenever I was really just doing an investigation on Jesus and different religions in general. I looked into Islam. I also looked into Buddhism, looking at the pillars of truth, those things.
So it was a bit of a process. Like, I don't want to necessarily interrupt you when you're telling your story, but
yeah, you're fine. You're fine.
The reason I have two different questions as a stranger, the why are you a Christian and the how are you a Christian, is that wouldn't you think that the why and the how should be included in the same process? Like, if I give a different answer to how I got to a conclusion versus why I'm at the conclusion, wouldn't that be a bit of a problem? So, like, you told me your why, but your how was more of a journey and a process. Is the how, or I'm sorry, is the why included in the how in some way that makes sense?
Is the why included in the how? Yeah. I'd say that it's just been through, if I were to like speed up my exact how, I'd just say it'd be in my continuous search within the arguments against Christianity, as well as the arguments supporting Christianity, that I continue in my faith and that I'm here where I'm at today.
Well, just to maybe clarify what Elliott was asking, would you say that you had the how, in other words, you were already in the faith before you had a why?
Was I already in the faith how before I had a why? No, I think that I think they were simultaneously. I think they occurred simultaneously. Just like in that period, I had a different why than I do now. So,
and what was your why then? That's what we're wanting to know.
Yeah, I think the why originally was very like, I think it was very much so in the people who were around me that influenced that.
Well, let me ask you this.
So,
do you think that the majority of Christians, do you think that they came to Christianity through a long process of studying the evidence and the arguments and making a rational decision? Or do you think the majority of Christians became Christians through simply being born into it, and they can never remember a time when they weren't a Christian?
I think that's a fair assessment of how most people come to their faith. But, yeah, I think that's in general with a lot of just beliefs in general.
And you think that's a good process to finding the truth, is to simply be being born into your conclusion?
I don't think that
that sounds like faith.
No, I would disagree. I think that it can give you a basis as to, just like how I was saying, it can give you a certain how, but it can't give you a why. It gives you a starting point to how you got to the place that you're at, but it doesn't give you a place as to why you stay in that thing.
But if people were finding that why later, if they were finding those good reasons, like, wouldn't it make sense that we'd see a lot more people switching religions? Because you're not automatically born at the right conclusion. You have to find it through a rational process. So if people actually later on were using a rational process, we would see constant switching of religions as people find the correct one. But we don't see that. The vast majority of Christians stay Christians. And to me, that says they're not being rational.
I would disagree. I think that a lot of Christians, they just don't feel they don't have the why to investigate. They haven't found a reason to use their rational faculties to challenge their beliefs in that way.
Can I ask you something? You said earlier that your why that you started out with was the group of people you were with.
Yeah.
Do you think a group of people is a reliable way to determine truth?
What do you mean by that?
Like,
is a reliable way.
Is being in a particular group of people, whatever they believe, just believing what they believe, is that a reliable way to base your life on? Is that a reliable way to determine truth?
I don't believe so, no. And I think that's I alluded to that a bit about why I deconstructed in the first place. I had removed myself from that kind of environment to really just get to the root of why I believe something. And if this foundation that I have, or the foundation in the belief in general, was something to even base my life around, or to commit to.
So would you say then that initially that you were a Christian and you had faith because this group of people said that this was true and you just believed it? Would you say that that's a sufficient justification for believing something?
No.
Okay. So then when I say faith is a method of drawing conclusions without sufficient justification, that's what I mean. That's what you did. You had faith. You drew a conclusion without sufficient justification.
Okay. So what I would say to that is that it's not an absolute that's not an absolute stance, or that in each and every single case of someone coming to a belief, is it unjustified. Like someone can believe come to a right conclusion by wrong means.
Sure, but we would never encourage that.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
Yeah. So we always want to have reliable methods, and we want to ensure that we have eliminated other possibilities that could play into, it could factor into what's true before we land on a conclusion. Mm-hmm. So if you already drew that conclusion, how old were you, by the way, when you first had what you would call faith?
When I really first became a Christian, I'd say I was 17.
Okay, so 17, and then and how old are you now? Do you mind me asking?
I am well into my 20s.
Okay, well into your 20s. Okay, cool. So you became a Christian 17. Now, I may have missed this earlier when Elliott was asking. Were you raised in a Christian home?
No, not entirely. My father, he did not have a faith. My mom, she did become a Christian, or she grew up Christian, walked away from the faith, and then she became a Christian later on when I moved in with her, when me and my brothers moved in with her. But yeah, I guess technically you could say, since my mom was Christian, that I did grow up a bit in the Christian home. Yeah, that'd be fair to say.
So you were introduced to the idea of God from a very young age then?
Yeah.
Sure. So there was probably never a time that you can remember where God was proposed to you as a proposition of something you should believe, and you sat down and said, well, let me weigh out the evidence and let me really see if there's good justification to believe that a God exists. You probably never did that because you were just taught that kind of like I was growing up and kind of like Elliott was, we just believed this thing called God and there was never a reason to question it. So we just believed it and never thought that it could possibly be wrong.
To that, I don't know. I would disagree. I think there were many points. I remember even in high school where I had different conversations with people who were atheist and Muslim as well. Just understanding that they had different worldviews and the existence of those different worldviews besides of what I was hearing at home from my mom, and getting some Sundays at church. The fact that there were different worldviews meant that there was something that went against my own. So that had to be something that was contemplated. It's not something that just came second nature, like, oh, they're wrong. Just like, why? There was always that question of why are there these other beliefs?
So what actually did you do to test whether or not the God proposition was true? Another way of asking that is, how did you go about attempting to falsify the proposition of God?
Well, I think that mainly came in the form of engaging with the people, with my fellow students who thought otherwise, and also.
Well, I don't mean generalities. I mean, like, I'm asking for a specific. Like, what did you do to try to falsify God before you landed on the conclusion that he was true? Or you could state it in a positive way. Like, what was the evidence that you landed on that said inconclusively that this must be true without a question?
Originally,
did you rule out all other possibilities is what I'm asking. And how?
Yeah.
I want to know how.
I just say, when I first came and committed to Christ, I just did research on just like the resurrection. And I was just looking at its like historical impact and mainly just a lot of Google research and things, and arguments for other worldviews.
So I'm curious how a person goes about doing that specifically, because we might have to have a conversation about sources. Everybody values sources in a different way. They go to different sources. Like, how do you decide what sources you're going to consult and find reliable?
Now, I will acknowledge, like I said previously, I think that the method that I used whenever I initially came and made a commitment to Christ was faulty. I didn't know entirely how to interpret or make comparative data, or even what like counter data was in that sense, and how that played into the part. But and like you said, how sources do matter, and like what qualifications did someone come to a certain conclusion, and what methodologies does someone use in order to come to a conclusion as well. But yeah.
So before we get to sources, what exactly were your methods? Like, what types of sources did you use? Did you read books? Did you read articles? Did you Google? How did you go about it?
I literally just Googled, and I looked at different articles online about the different positive claims from the religions and worldviews that I was looking into. I looked into Buddhism, Islam, atheism, and Christianity, and that was it. Like, just some major world religions, and that was the comparative. That was what I was comparing, just the positive claims. I wasn't looking at the counter claims of each.
So obviously, in the end, you did come to a conclusion. So you did accept some sources as being superior to others. So I'm curious, what in the end, which sources can you name any at all that like you found credible?
When I was 17, I don't remember, man. Honestly,
that's fine. I'm just curious because.
Well, that's fine, but then let's update it to where you are now. What sources or source would you say is your foundation that you drew these conclusions based upon?
Well, I'd say the one of the things I would say, of course, is looking at the Bible itself, but also looking at what's his name? There was a book that I read recently talking about the resurrection. It was like polemics. He's like very controversial.
Greg Bonson, Rob Bell,
Gary Habermas.
Gary Habermas,
No.
yeah.
Hold on.
Josh McDowell. Was he a Christian apologist that most people would know of?
The guy who does the Kalam argument.
That's his name. Dale Allison.
Dale
And
Allison,
he essentially looked at different explanations for the data about the resurrection and different theories about how the church started as well. And he compiled a lot of different other authors, and that's one of the things that's one of the things that keeps me just like intrigued about the resurrection, and just like thinking something had to have happened there that caused that explains for all of this data about how the church began. That isn't just
right. But
people believe what they want to believe.
Right, but that all came after the Bible was written. My question to all Christians, I would really love to get a good answer to this, is why do we need defenders of the faith that add information to defend the Bible when God gave us the Bible itself? So if you have the New Testament, do you actually need Dale Ellison at all? Like, wouldn't the New Testament
I think,
speak for itself?
One of the things that I would say is we see even in the New Testament with I think it's Thomas and the Ethiopian eunuch. Whenever the Ethiopian eunuch has questions, he goes to Thomas, and Thomas is able to clear up the confusions that he has. I think that's a beautiful thing about just humanity in general, that we're able to learn from one another and be able to see things through other people's interpretive lenses in order to gain like a more full, well-rounded understanding of a certain topic.
And I'm not saying that doesn't have merit, but if I just take the Bible off the shelf, which is supposed to be God's message to humans, like God didn't write Dale Ellison's book, God wrote the Bible. So I read through the New Testament and I say, you know what? I just don't find this story believable. Yeah. Now, what could somebody possibly add to that that's going to convince me that it's a true story if I think the story itself isn't true? Because you have to understand that everybody writing about this, trying to convince people to be a Christian, they're writing about this stuff 2,000 years later. They are so far removed from that story that I read that how can they possibly know anything for certain? I just read the story and I say, you know what? I just don't think that this actually happened.
Okay. If I can answer that, I think that one of the things that really helps is to look at the Bible as the way that it is. Like people, there are so many different authors and books that and books within the Bible. It's just like a collection of different writings from different people for different purposes as well. But they're all experiencing or at least claiming to experience the same deity. And it's not necessarily that God had his hand, or as I initially thought, that God had his hand and was literally like instructing these people on what to write word for word, letter for letter. But it's literally people just people who are explaining and who are inspired in the literal sense by their experiences with God. So whenever you're talking about like the New Testament, it's and why should there be extra writing to it? We have to understand that these people these people who are writing in the New Testament are writing to a specific person, or they are writing to a specific people for a specific purpose. And the people who they're writing to already have a certain context that they're dealing with that we are far removed from. So in order to gain that, in order to gain that context, there are people who actively study the context and the cultures in which the people who are living in were writing to. We often don't have access as laymen to those things. So that's why it's important for us to go to people who would be a little bit more knowledgeable about that context and subject.
Let me take your narrative, and I'll make an analogy for what my point is.
Okay.
So just because like the Bible is an anthology, it's a collection of different books. It's not one book. So you're saying many people are writing about the same topic, and the topic is God. Okay. That doesn't automatically mean that they are telling true stories. So for example, and you also had a cultural context as well. So you've heard of the concept of the great American novel. So if we rounded up a bunch of the greatest like works of American fiction and we put them all in the same book, made an anthology out of them, we have a collection of different books or different writers, and they're writing about the same topic. And the topic is like the American experience. But all the stories are fiction.
Yeah.
Like now, if I fast forward like a couple thousand years and I have this anthology of a culture called America that I'm not a part of on the other side of the world, and I read these stories, these great American novels, I could very well come to the conclusion that these are supposed to be true stories, but they're in fact not. So just because a very impressive collection of different books is put under the same cover from a different culture writing about the same topic does not necessarily mean that they're true stories.
Yeah. And I completely agree with you. I think it also just matters about what we see from history about the topics that they're writing about. Now, those things could be false, but and you could like even write them off as something like, oh, this actually happened. But what matters is not only like the genre that you're writing from and the purpose of that you're writing from, but what are the things that you're trying to get right? Is the author of these fictional stories intending to write a fictional story, or are they intending to try to do some historical reportage?
So I wouldn't be able to tell the difference, because let's take John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. Now he writes in the third person narrative, and he's talking about actual characters. Now, and we know that was an actual historical time period during the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. The people did in fact leave the heartland and go to California during that time. Everything about The Grapes of Wrath is historical from a third party's perspective who doesn't know John Steinbeck is a fiction writer. It sounds exactly like it's supposed to be a true story if you don't know any better. And if I apply that same standard to the Bible, especially to the Gospels, I read the Gospels, they're in the third person perspective of that omniscient narrator. They're not claims to be firsthand accounts. And I don't know the author. Like, I have the benefit of knowing John Steinbeck, who he is, and that he's writing fiction, but I don't have the benefit of knowing the authors of the Gospels because they're not named. So for all I know, these are made up stories, just like The Grapes of Wrath, talking about a real culture in a real historical context, but events that did not in fact actually happen.
One of the things that I would say is we know that his name, John Steinbeck, you said? John Steinbeck?
Right.
I think one of the things that we see is just like the trend in the genre of historical fiction being like a prevalent thing within our modern writing. And when it comes to ancient texts, that's not really a genre to begin with.
It is though. It is. We have a very popular movie in the theaters right now called The Odyssey. That is based on historical fiction written like way before the Gospels. Like Homer's Odyssey was historical fiction. Like and everybody agrees that he wasn't writing actual history.
Yeah. I would agree that it's more so of a tale, but it's not meant to be a historical. It's not meant to be historical fiction. It is meant to be told as a reason or a mythological reason for certain occurrences happening. But that's not necessarily meaning that the author intended to record history. Those are two separate things.
You see why it's so hard to determine this 2,000 years later? Like, how do we know for sure? Like, maybe maybe the Gospels were written as historical fiction. How can we?
Because I have a couple questions there. Number one, how do you know, Zonius, what their intentions were?
I think that we can deduce a bit of what their intentions were from just the. I take to the historical, or the church, what church history says about the writers of the Gospels themselves, that they are who they say they are. You know, Mark is in by Mark, Luke, Matthew, John.
Except the gospel writers aren't the apostles that the Gospels talk about.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, the Gospels were compiled some generation after and later after the events in the Gospels actually took place.
Generations, probably not. I think the earliest gospel dating that we have is for Mark, and I think that's in 65 to 70 AD. Right. And then we have Matthew that goes after that, which is around, I think it's like 80 something, 83, something like that.
No, I think we're going to agree on the actual dating, but when you mentioned that the church fathers verified that the apostles were the ones that actually wrote those like that's where I would take issue, because in my research, think it's verified, but well, they make the claim. The church fathers make the claim. So in my research, and this is why I think sources are very important, and like who we trust, because Christianity makes a lot of things to convince people that are like stretching the truth a lot. As far as I can tell in my research, the claim that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John comes from a single church father, and the following church fathers simply quoted him. And the problem is that first early church father that made that claim never gives his reasons why he believed that. He just makes the claim. So we are tracing that all the way back to a single person making a single claim without giving justification. So it would be unfair to say all the church fathers verified that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote those. It's more fair to say they believed that because the first guy claimed it in his writings, but he didn't give a reason.
I don't think that's necessarily all that they go off of, and I may need to research that a little bit more. Do you mind to give me your source behind that? I have this book on my list that I'm meaning to make through. It's Christianity and the Eyewitnesses. I'm trying to make my way through a couple other books before then. But
so what I did to verify that, because I've had this conversation multiple times. So to fact check myself, first thing you do is you just Google it, and that took me to multiple forums. One of them was Quora. There was an expert on Quora saying it was one church father. That eventually took me to Bart Ehrman, the scholar Bart Ehrman, if you're familiar with him, New Testament scholar. He said it was one church father. Then I went through every one of the church fathers' Wikipedia articles, and I tried to find where any one of them cited their sources or made the claim of gospel authorship, and I could find nothing except for the the first original guy to make the claim. So like I combed through this as best that I could because I really want to know, you know, if I'm right or wrong on it. And like that's the best I can do is it's a single church father making a single claim and everyone else quotes him.
Well, I may need to look into this a little bit more, but I know that one of the things that I have read in passing was about the writing styles of Matthew and Luke in particular, were congruent with their occupation, or at least the occupations that they are claimed to have had. With Luke being a physician and Matthew a tax collector, and the writing conventions.
So the question I have here though is that what we're seeing is that it is unverifiable whether or not the gospel writers are the people that they say they are in the gospels. It's also unverifiable whether they were true to who the gospels say they were, even if they were the actual writers. It's also possible that they all saw things that were not actually real, and they, you know, said something they thought was true, but it wasn't true. They also, as we know, the three, Matthew, Luke, and John, seem to borrow from Mark and don't change a whole lot, like from the third person to the first person when they're referring to themselves. So if Mark got anything wrong, then the rest of them got it wrong too. There's so many possibilities that you still need to rule out before you can sit down and say, I have drawn a conclusion based on conclusive evidence, and it is this, and that's it. Like, there's just too much open ground here.
It's also important. It's important for us to agree that all four of the gospels, not a single one of them actually reveals their name. Like, they're all technically anonymous. So attributing authorship is something that has to be done later and from outside the Bible. And that's a problem already. And for me, a very big problem is the language that they're written in. Like, they're written in Koine Greek. They're not written in Aramaic, and they're not written in Hebrew. And the apostles or the disciples would have spoken in the common tongues of the time, Aramaic and Hebrew. So for all of them to suddenly magically become Koine Greek is highly suspicious for me.
Well, one of the things that that was interesting, we see that Mark himself is, would the disciples, before I get into that, would the disciples have any motivation to learn or pick up Koine Greek, or even have scribes that could take down their words in that language?
Maybe, but we know the statistics on literacy in ancient Judea during the time of the Romans, and it was very, very low, just literacy in general. So what you're suggesting is that somebody who was a common man, like a fisherman, later in life somehow was able to learn Koine Greek, but learn it to such perfection that he was able to write in a very complicated way to tell an entire story. Like, why would he do that instead of simply tell it in his native tongue? That's a monumental effort that a fisherman would have had to go through later in life, learning a third language. That's remarkable. And it's remarkable for all of them to have done it. Yeah. And we have no gospels in Aramaic or Hebrew.
I would say that Mark is, of course, like the earliest gospel, but he, I need to verify which scholars say this, but I believe that Mark, he is a disciple, or he was working with Peter.
Right.
Now we know that Peter, he was very much so a pillar of what the church began as. And so if he was to be, if he was given the charge by Jesus to go out into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, we know that he would start where he's at, which is in Rome, who are
he would start where he's at in Judea, in
Israel. Judea. Judea, and then he would also go to Rome in the innermost parts of the world. But he would have the motivation to speak there as well. So if he was to be a leader in those areas, then it'd be wise for him to want to pick up the language and speak to people.
Which would be a very difficult thing for somebody as an adult, especially a layperson, to suddenly learn a third language. We're assuming that he spoke Aramaic and Hebrew, but for him to pick up a third language, it's very difficult. I couldn't learn a second language as an adult, but we're to assume, because that's what we're doing. We are assuming. We're to assume that Peter did it, and he did it so well that he was able to craft this story. Like a literary tale, like worthy of the marketplace of ideas. It wasn't just something he cobbled together in broken English, you know.
Yeah. I need to look into this more, but I think there are parts of Peter's epistle that are less formal. It could be that Mark, being a scribe, was more knowledgeable and assisted with the wording to make sure that what he was saying was palatable to the people that he was presenting it to.
Sure, but we're like we're like multiple assumptions above where we started, though. We are assuming that it was Mark that wrote it, even though the Gospel of Mark doesn't say that it was Mark. We're assuming that he got it from Peter. We're assuming that Peter learned the language. We're assuming they colluded to write this gospel. We're just making a series of assumptions on top of assumptions, and I'm stuck all the way back here at the beginning, and I'm saying I have no reason to believe any of this. My only reason is a single church father said it.
One of the things I would say that points to that gospel, the reliability of gospel authorship, not only is, of course, the writing conventions, but also we see that there's no mix-up within the manuscripts of the early church, which would be expected if there were any other authors that were attributed to those writings. But we see multiple different miles apart, these churches are still attributing these four names and not getting any of them mixed up with one another. So
let me ask you this. Sorry, I don't want to keep interrupting you. I just want to keep moving a little bit here, because I know Ellen wants to jump in, and I want to just give me a little bit of leeway here, Ellen. Let me ask you this then. Let's pretend hypothetically that you find out through your research, or you come to doubt it, that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were in fact not written by eyewitnesses. They were written by members of the literary class in Rome, because this story had become so popular through Paul's preachings that certain very literate, learned people in the Roman church decided they wanted to write the story down. Let's pretend that you come to that conclusion. These are not eyewitness accounts. If that's the case, would you still be a Christian? Would you still believe the Gospels if you found out they were not written by eyewitnesses?
If or not necessarily by, I only think that I don't think that they all were written by eyewitnesses. Like Luke, he was an eyewitness. Mark, he wasn't an eyewitness either. I only think that Matthew and John, but that's a caveat.
What if you just simply found out they weren't written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? What would you do with that information?
I would look more into, who did write these things and why.
But would you stop believing them until then?
Yeah, I don't think I would hold the theological convictions that I do have until it's more concrete about who I'm getting my information from and the methodology that they use in order to get the information that they do have. I think that that'd be a wise assessment.
Right. And so considering all of my questions and doubts about the authorship and about where these gospels come from, does it sound irrational for me to base my eternal future on something that I have a lot of questions and doubts about? Is that a rational thing? Like I'm gonna say, you know what? Yeah. I'm gonna stake my entire life and the future of my soul on something that just doesn't hold water for me, man. Like I don't know who wrote these.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't blame you, but I also would definitely encourage you to continue in research. I don't think that I don't think that well, if I can, I don't think that I don't think that people's atheism or any atheism is a completely unjustified belief. If you have questions or if you have doubts about the thing, I would say continue to look into the thing, but also be honest with yourself in where you are with your beliefs.
Well, that's my problem, is that I have done my research to the point where I can't do any further research on this specific topic. Like I played it all the way out and I hit the brick wall, and I can find no confirmation anywhere that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And so like I've concluded, like I've come to my conclusion. There's nothing else that I can do.
Have you, well, I don't know. Would you be interested in going through a book series with me? I haven't started Jesus and the Eyewitnesses yet. I'd love to start with you.
We would. That's when we'd have to discuss sources and who we find reliable and why. Because a book that you might recommend to me, I might say, well, I have reason to not trust that author. And I know exactly what those authors are going to say because I've done my research. So I know exactly what reasons they're going to give me for these being Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I mean, we're at a point where I wouldn't want to say the science is settled, but it kind of is settled because there is no new information available. Like one side has X and the other side has Y, and there's no further that we can go unless we uncover some kind of, writings from the first century. There's just nothing more we can do.
I don't know. I feel like there's always something that you can learn, and that through the people that you research and through the information that's available to you, even if it's another perspective on already established data, it might cause you to look at it a different way. I know one of the things that I looked at was one of the completely unrelated topic, but just like one of the hard problems of consciousness, and looking at the examination of Mary's room, and then also looking at one of the refutations, because the person who invented the thought experiment ended up retracting his statement. And I was like, why did he retract his statement? And whenever he retracted it, and I was supplied with his reasoning why, I was like, oh, I understand that now. And now I'm still working through that. And I thought it was already a done deal. Like, oh yeah, experiences are, there's something that is beyond the material that you draw our experiences from. But now I'm like,
right. It's a little different when it comes to historical material, because we only have what we have. So what you're asking me to do is to reinterpret the existing data, not find new data, because we don't have new data. We have what we have when it comes to the gospel authorship. So you're wanting me to listen to other people who have other interpretations of it, and like maybe one of them will stick and I'll start to believe it?
Not necessarily. It's more so that they may have a certain piece. Maybe they might fit the piece together in a way that causes you to look at it, not necessarily even as if it's correct, but it may cause you to look at something differently.
Right.
So Zonius, is there? Can I ask a quick question on this subject? Zonius, is there anything that would convince you that Elliott's conclusion is the correct one, or are you predetermined that no matter what, if you run into a brick wall, you're just going to keep looking and looking and looking until you find something that verifies the position you already hold?
I think that one of the things that would deem his I think one of the things that would deem his proposition correct it'd probably be if there was like maybe a motivating factor. I think that having an explanation that accounts for having an explanation with the most parsimonious explanation for like the data that we have more so, I think that would be a way for him to prove himself not prove himself, but prove the proposition as most likely, or at least more likely than the alternative.
Well, my question wasn't what would Elliott have to do to prove it to you. My question was what would make it so that you would be convinced of something that went against the current belief you have of the Gospels.
Yeah, and that's what I was explaining. I was saying like it would have to give more of an explanation for the data that we have presented to us.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is there wouldn't be a time where you would become settled with that. You would keep looking until something verified where you stand now.
No, I think I would investigate his claims by those merits, and of course, like he said, look at his sources, see what's trustworthy, and if it accounts for all the data, then I have no reason not to hold to that.
So what would happen if you ended up there? What would happen to your faith? Would you still keep believing, or would you say, I'm not going to believe anymore?
I think I would have to. I mean, naturally, what happens is I think I would continue to investigate just like those claims, because that's one thing. That's one thing that just really interests me, apart from just like my epistemological or even my faith, as my faith stands, is just the history of religion and history of the church, things like that, because those things have an impact on our culture and on our interactions like every single day. And so, and I love people, and I love understanding people too. So I think that's where I go.
So as far as a parsimonious explanation, I'd ask you this. Have you ever heard of something called the synoptic problem?
No, I have not heard of the synoptic problem. Okay.
So this would be something that you could Google right up to the quickest, most simplest explanation. Just type in the synoptic problem, go to Google Images, and you're going to find graphs of the 3 synoptic gospels, and it's going to show which gospels contain what percentages of the other gospel. And this demonstrates that, like you already said, Mark came first, then Matthew, and then Luke. So yeah, you can see laid out how these 3 gospels are building on top of each other, and as if they are growing a legend over time. And you can see how much of Mark Matthew copied, how much of Mark Luke copied word for word, and then how much Luke copied from Matthew, and Matthew might have copied from Luke. And you can see this problem materialize. It's very parsimonious, because you can see how these gospels are creations not organic, coming from an individual apostle or disciple who might have had a firsthand experience. Because if, in fact, like Matthew, the tax collector, wrote his firsthand account, he would not have had to have copied large parts of Mark word for word. He would have simply used his own words. But because he did, in fact, copy so much from Mark directly, it's not coming from Matthew, the tax collector, who had a firsthand account. Because
That's actually. Oh, go ahead.
So, if I witnessed something and I was going to write a story about something, a few decades back in my life, I would just write the story. I wouldn't wait for like my sister to write the story and then just copy and paste most of her content and then add some new material. Like that would prove that it wasn't actually me writing it. It would prove that it was somebody else trying to write my story for me.
That's interesting. One of the things that I would say to that is, well, would they have any motivation to be verbatim from the previous text, from Mark, or even like the hypothetical Q source? And I think that they would, like with our aforementioned we had talked about how Greek is not their first language of the people that who were the eyewitnesses. So if they were trying to describe an event that they had experienced, that they collectively experienced, then it not being their first language, they might try to use the same verbiage to describe the same thing that they
right. Yeah, I can see that. The problem is they're also using their own language as well, so they can in fact write new material because the new material is there. So the act of copying and pasting, it gives me two conclusions. One is your conclusion that they're copying and pasting for a reason, but they're an eyewitness. And my conclusion is they're not an eyewitness. They're copying and pasting because it's there. So why not use it and pass it off as your own? I mean, which conclusion makes more sense? That someone is stealing material, plagiarizing, or that somebody is plagiarizing for like a reason, even though they don't have to?
I think it'd be, well, by what do you, okay, so what do you mean that they don't? Yeah, they don't have to, but
okay. So let's pretend I'm Matthew. So I'm Matthew now. Old Mark over here got information for Peter and wrote a story. Okay, but I was a part of the story. So I read Mark's account from Peter, and I'm like, okay, cool. Now I'm gonna write my own because I have new information to add. So I can either write my story, which I'm going to do anyway, or I can plagiarize, copy and paste Mark's story, which makes no sense because I'm telling my own. Why would I do that? And I end up with the final product is something that's not particularly honest, even though that's my point, is I'm trying to write an honest narrative of what happened, but it's not honest because I stole Peter's original work, passed it off as my own. That's the other thing. It's not like Matthew says, hey, this is coming from Peter. He just writes it as if it's his own original work. Like that tells me that it's not Matthew. It tells me that it is a different Greek novelist who wants to embellish on the legend.
Well, I would also say that the importance is within the content of what's added and the purpose of what they're adding. Same with Luke, and the whatchamacallit, the attention to the audience in which they're writing to as well. I'm having trouble with.
I just can't trust the guy who plagiarized the story but then said also it was his. Like either it's Matthew or it's not Matthew talking. And if you plagiarize Mark, then I don't see how it can be Matthew. And if it is Matthew, I don't know how I can trust him.
Okay. I would say, well, let me do a little bit more research, and I'll probably come back to you another day on just like gospel reliance.
That's totally fair.
Yeah, that's fair.
I do want to. Oh,
I was going to say I don't want to. You go ahead first.
Oh, I was about to say I did want to get to the topic that that you guys initially put up with the faith making friendships fickle.
Yeah,
I want to get to that too. Yeah. I promise you we're going to get there. Can I just ask you 2 or 3 quick questions? And I don't want it to be about this topic because you're going to research it and there's no point in doing it. But something you said earlier on, because it's been on my mind this whole conversation, you said that it's possible that the writers of the Gospels may have gotten some things wrong. Is that correct? Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you know which things they got right?
I would say that which I would look at it through the a historical lens, of course, the things that we can like look at geographically, look at politically, look at you know, anthropologically, like what's going on with the people at the time.
Scientifically, maybe even? Since that's the only method we have to be able to determine truth?
I mean, that's interesting because there are some things that happen that within history. The whole thing behind the scientific method is that it's supposed to be testable and repeatable, but you can't really do that with historical events, and some historical events that we hold to be true.
That's the problem of history.
Sure, and this is
for believing stories.
Yeah, this is the concern I have. So, like, how do you know which parts of the Gospels are true and which ones are wrong? Which ones they got right and which ones they got wrong? Which ones they were right about? Which ones they, made up? We don't know. And my point is, how can we possibly know that resurrections that they talk about were real? We have no evidence to support that data. There's absolutely zero reason to think resurrections happen, or virgin births for that matter. And yet the story tells us they happen. And you said some of the things they may have gotten wrong. And I'm saying, how do you know they got that right? And if they didn't get that right, that pretty much destroys the whole Christian faith.
And I think that also just, I would say that goes back to what I was mentioning earlier about Dale Allison's work with the just like the data that we have on just like what happens after Jesus is claimed to have risen from the dead, and investigating the claims of not only the disciples at the time, but also what we know about the early church and different commentaries on the early church, like from Josephus and Pliny the Younger and things like that.
Yeah, sure, but none of those are contemporaries, so they weren't there to witness any of these events.
And I was also about to say within the Gospels as well, all the data within just the early church, and what would be the best explanation, or what are the explanations that have to account for what we see happening post-resurrection. So,
well, I mean, there's a lot of different possibilities is the whole point we've been at tonight. We don't know.
Yeah. But
and so you got to realize, like the Bible itself, the Gospels themselves are making the claims. You can't use the stories in the Gospels themselves that are making the claims as also evidence to verify the claims it's making, because the same person making the claim has to use outside evidence to demonstrate that claim is actually true. Like I can't just walk up to you and make a claim about something and say, hey, I saw it. You can just trust me. It's true. That doesn't really work.
I would say, do you believe that claims are at least a form of evidence?
No. I know this has been a popular thing recently in Christian apologetics, where claims are evidence or claims are not evidence. Like, I understand the motivation to try to make claims evidence because there's testimony allowed in a court of law. And so it seems like evidence, but
not just that. It's that it raises the probability of something being the case.
Well, sure. And look, a testimony can be
raise the
a
probability.
testimony. Let me finish, Elliott. Hang on. A testimony can be supporting evidence, but it cannot be sufficient evidence. And the problem with what we have in the Gospels is we have nothing but testimony.
One of the things that but the things that I think that's also the point, is that the Gospels are supposed to support texts, or supposed to be kind of supplementary to something that happened in history. So,
but it's making the claim itself, so it can't also be the supporting evidence.
But I would also say to that that churches themselves and people who believed in Jesus came before the Gospels themselves. Like Bart Ehrman, you quoted Bart Ehrman. We see in, I think it's either 1st or 2nd Corinthians, that Paul quotes an early Christian creed that was like from, I think they said as early as 35 AD, which is within the first 2 years of Jesus Christ.
I don't know how they know that. If Paul is the source of the creed, like, I don't know how we can date the creed to a particular decade.
But that's the thing. Paul's not the source of the creed. He is quoting.
Where he has to be the source of the creed for us, because where else do we find the creed? The only way we know that creed existed is through Paul.
Yeah, it would be.
Therefore, he's the source.
There are other ways. That's one of the things that we kind of neglect. That oral tradition, or even just a word of mouth, is also a form of data that, unfortunately, we don't necessarily have.
If I erase
the data that we have to support those things, just like if I quoted you saying something that maybe we had an interaction in person. If I said, "Oh yeah, he said to me the other day that XYZ," you may not have exact like an audio recording to say that you said this, but me saying that you said that and it actually happened is
sure, Zonius. But the difference is you're talking about things that are minuscule, things that are that we have no reason to question. Like, if I tell you I have $1 in my wallet, that's just not a big deal. If I say I have $1 million in my wallet, you're going to be like, yeah, prove it. When you're making a claim of something like a resurrection or a God existing, this is a little bit more than just, hey, my friends and I saw it, just trust us. That's just not good enough. You would never, ever allow that to be sufficient evidence in a murder case. Like, you would need more substantiating evidence than just, hey, we saw it. And so you're making a dramatic claim here that the Gospels are making dramatic claims about things that we have no evidence for whatsoever, things that are supernatural. And you're saying the testimony of people from 2,000 years ago that we've never met, can't verify their story, have conflicting stories about, are unsure whether or not they even wrote the texts themselves. And you're saying, but that's good enough. We're just going to believe that these things happened.
I think it's more than just the testimonies themselves, or the it's what we find outside the Bible, like what I was saying about the creed. The point of me bringing up the creed is to show that there was something that was before the writings of the New Testament that pointed.
What I was going to say about the creed, though, is if I erased Corinthians completely, where would I find that creed? If I lost Corinthians, where can I dig up the creed? What other source has it? Like, it only appears in Corinthians, whether it was oral tradition or not. Wherever Paul got it's irrelevant. Paul's the only source for it. He could have made it up.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility, but then again, you would also have to provide data for that, or even an evidence for that claim that he just made it up.
But it's assumptions. It's assumptions all the way down. We're assuming that Paul was telling the truth, or we're assuming that he wasn't. Like, everything is an assumption. We're assuming that the Gospels were written by the authors. Like, we're assuming these events happened. Everything's an assumption, and it's all 100% of it is based on claims that people wrote down. That's it. That's it.
In fact, even the claim that God exists is just declared in the Bible. Like, the Bible says God exists, and the reason we know God exists is because he said so in the Bible, and the Bible says he said so. And like, the whole thing is circular. Like, there's no reason to believe anything that the Bible says is true. We just have no way to verify that.
And that's not the reason I believe in God, but I know that's a whole separate discussion as well.
Sure. But I mean, that's fine. We've beat the dead horse now. Hopefully you got some things to think about. And let's move on to faith makes friendships fickle. Go ahead. You wanted to talk about that. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. I just wanted to, what does make y'all think that faith makes friendships fickle?
So when you make a friend, do you believe, well, any of your friends that you have now even, do you believe that you have a mission from God, that they are part of your mission in life? That there's more to it than just the sheer friendship, but that your mission in life is to ensure with everything you have, to do what you can to ensure that they are going to heaven with you?
Not really. My mission is to love them, and does that include letting them know the gospel, or at least living the gospel out in my own life?
Well, I'd ask you this. If you in fact are their friend the entire time you're friends with them, and you never give them your testimony, like, are you going to be judged for that? Does God see that as sin if you don't try to convert them in some way?
If does God see that as sin?
If you don't witness to them and you don't give them your testimony, will God hold you accountable for that?
Technically, yeah. The Bible says that that we will give an account for every idle word. So it's like every careless word or deed that we do. Yeah.
Why are you on earth? In your opinion?
In my opinion, I would say that I'm on earth to be an image bearer of God.
Exactly. So when you talk about idle words, is everything else that happens in your life that doesn't have to do with God idle?
No, I think that's more so speaking to like purposelessness, and so it's living and interacting and loving people with a purpose, you know.
And the purpose is God-centered. So if you are friends with someone for your whole life, when you hang out with them, you spend time with them, you be a good friend to them, is all of that, if you never bring it back to God and you don't use that time with them for God in some way to show him through you to them, is that not idle? idle time spent? Because none of the things that you do, like you go out to the lake and go fishing with your friends, like that's not going to carry into eternity. It has no weight to it. It's idle time. Like,
now,
you know what I mean?
I don't know. I don't think that itself is idle time. I mean, if you are literally showing the person or showing your friend that you genuinely care about them enough to want to just spend time with them, see how they're doing, that's love right there. I mean, Jesus, though he did go around.
That doesn't get them to heaven. You could show them love their entire life, and they still could end up in hell.
That's fine. The Bible doesn't say you have to convert everyone you meet. It just says to love your. The second commandment is like the first commandment. The first and greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And also the second one is to love your neighbor. And we see that Jesus all the time, he wasn't going around, even though he might have preached the gospel and did different sermons, we see oftentimes him, around people who may not have received the gospel. Like the time where he is eating with when the disciples said that he's eating with sinners, we don't see that he's necessarily preaching a sermon right there. He is literally just spending time with those folks. And
but Jesus gave the Great Commission before he ascended to heaven, and he told his followers to go throughout all the world proclaiming the good news. And so you someday get to heaven, and you appear before God for your reward or your chastisement. And God says, I told you to go throughout all the world and witness with the good news. And your neighbor who you claim to love was right there. You spent time with him. You were his friend. You never witnessed to him. And he never got the good news. Now he's in hell. Are you proud of yourself?
Proud of myself. That's
what God is asking. God is like, I told you to go and witness. And your neighbor was right there. You said you were his friend. You never witnessed to him. You never tried. That's something to be ashamed of, right?
I think God would be more so, he'd be, I don't know. I think that God's main, the way that he looks at us is through the lens of Christ. And you can have multiple different ways that you preach the gospel. There's a famous saying that says you should preach the gospel, and if necessary, you should use words.
Well, I don't find that in the Bible, though. In my opinion, when I read the Bible, the gospel is the gospel. I can't preach it through, body language. I have to tell people Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Period. You have to get the message out there. And I don't think God plays games. If he were
God, God doesn't play games. And don't miss what I'm saying. What I am saying is, yes, you should let others know, and your friend, as a Christian, I should be letting my friends know, just being outspoken with my faith and letting them know the gospel. But being a person who is loving and understanding where the person is at is more important than the fact that they verbally are chastised for their actions, or they need to be able to see that there is not that they don't need to be able to see, but the reason why Christ is able, it wants to inhabit us, is that his gospel is spread not just through our actions, but not just by our words, but by our actions as well. And if we're unable to love somebody where they're at and understand where they're at and meet with them, then the gospel isn't really in us in the way that he wants us to have it.
What I'm hearing from you is that you are a better human than you are a Christian, because your friendships, it sounds like your friendships are not fickle. Like Ellen and I are talking about the majority of Christians that we have met make the focus of the friendship, like the reason to know us is because of the faith. They want to witness to us, or they want to be brothers in Christ with us. And when that connection fails, the friendship itself fails, which makes it a fickle friendship. We leave the faith, they abandon us, we don't abandon them. Or they want to be friends with us, but as Christians, the only reason that they're doing so is to somehow witness to us. So that's what we mean by faith makes fickle friendships. But apparently, like, you're being a better human than they are.
Yeah, and don't get us wrong. It doesn't mean every Christian we've encountered is like that. I know of some that, like Josh Patterson. I love the guy. He gets along great with us. I don't see any tension there. But Josh's faith is a little interesting. He does not hold much of the tenets of Christianity at all. So I find it very, very interesting. So he's a very unique type of Christian. He's also a better human than he is a Christian, in my opinion. So it sounds like that about you as well. So it's not like we're saying across the board. And this isn't just a Christian problem. This is a faith problem. And Elliott and I made that case earlier on. Because when you believe certain things, you conclude them without justification. And when somebody else brings to the table something that requires you to defend yourself, it's so easy to be like, well, I can't associate with that person anymore because I can't go down that road. And we've seen that happen way too many times. So this isn't a clean slate across the board. Every Christian's like this. That's not what we're saying. And we're also not saying it's only Christians that are like this. But predominantly, we have seen this happen in Christianity quite a bit. Not just when you become an atheist. This happened to me quite a bit when I was a Christian. And by the way, you're talking to two former Christians here, in case you didn't know that. So we've both evaluated all of these claims. We both believed that the Bible was true 100% when we were Christians. But over time, with like all the research Elliott was saying was done, it's just like we couldn't hang on anymore. But we're still willing to engage and talk to Christians because we want people to think utilizing evidence. Because if you're not using epistemology of empiricism, you're not going to be able to verify whether or not what you believe is true. It's just faith-based. It's just, I like this, and so it's true. Faith is not a reliable way to determine truth.
And like, as an atheist, I will be friends with Christians. I got no problem with that. And even though I want them to not be Christians and I would like to have the hard conversations with them, I am perfectly willing to go my entire life being friends with them and that never happening. But it oftentimes, like more often than not, it doesn't work the other way around, is what we're saying.
In fact, come to think of it, I much prefer Christians sometimes because it gives me something to talk about. I like debating. So I'd be bored out of my mind if everybody was not a Christian anymore. But anyway, I mean, it's fun to have conversations, and I like doing that, and then just going out and having a beer. Like to me, it doesn't change my feelings towards them. I just don't think that faith is a good method for determining truth, and I'm trying to convince them of that, and they're trying to convince me of the opposite. And it's like, cool. To me, I think it's fun. I don't think it needs to destroy a friendship, but I have seen too many of them get destroyed because of this, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, and I think the underlying reason in the end is that I don't think they're going to hell if I don't talk them out of Christianity, but they think I'm going to hell if they don't talk me into it. And that puts us at there's a power dynamic there that's skewed because they think very badly of me and think I'm going to literally burn alive for eternity when I think that we're both the same. And none of that's going to happen.
Well, and not just that, but even in the here and now, there is a certain amount of things that I no longer think are what you would call sinful as a Christian or even immoral. But as a Christian, they are just sinful to do. And so when I present those as things that I'm just allowed to do, they're like, whoa, you can't do that. That's just wrong. And you're like, why is that wrong? And the only reason is, well, the Bible says so. So that's also a dissension issue.
Yeah. And I agree. I think that to Elliott's point, I've also seen like some of my friends that 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 have left the faith, you know, and they get treated like awfully by the people who they used to call brother and sister, and that's never okay. I think that Christ weeps over those relationships as well. But because that's not what he intended. He knows that there are people that are different, that that come from different walks of life, and that the relationship with him is a personal one. And a lot of times those the brokenness in those relationships comes from the personal what should we call it, like the personal wants and expectations out of their relationships, rather than meeting the person exactly where they are. And that's what Christ wanted to do, like with the woman at the well. Whenever he's like he knew her, at least that's what the gospel what the gospel says, like he knew her for exactly who she was, and therefore he was able to speak to her. So in order for us to be able to love one another, in order to actually be able to be in good company with one another, we have to be able to understand each other. And we have to be able to understand each other where we are. That's epistemologically, politically, ideologically. And so
you're saying that Jesus meets you where you are. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay. So you also said when we first started the conversation that you're mostly a Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume you believe in eternal hell.
I'm an annihilationist.
Okay. Well, that I'm glad to hear that, because that just stopped an entire conversation from happening. I was gonna ask you, if Jesus meets you where you're at, does he meet you in hell after he sends you there?
Well, he doesn't meet you after he annihilates you, that's for sure.
I would much rather be annihilated. I'd much rather be annihilated than sent to hell. So, hey, I give you props on that one. You have found a way to make your religion less hateful.
Yeah. Just doing my best.
On a positive note,
we're like that.
On a positive note, we both see the end of things the same way, except you think by faith you're going to go to a place called heaven. But the rest of the world who doesn't believe, they're just going to die like the rest of us believe anyway. So, hey, what can I tell you? I mean, I don't know. Like, that's going to be an interesting topic maybe for another time. You know, this idea of hope and a spirit. And, you know, you said, you were saying earlier, this is not the way God intended things with friendships. And I'd like to know how you know what God intended. There's just all kinds of questions. And this conversation was uber fun. I really enjoyed talking to you, Zonius. By the way, bro, you have nothing to fear being on camera. You're a handsome dude. You're eloquent. You're honest. You're kind. You know how to have a conversation, bro. Everything about this was fantastic. So I 100%. Hope you come back. Yeah, I hope you come back and continue the conversation.
Once you get over that initial fear of being on camera, like it's over and you won't have a problem. I mean, you've done it for about approximately 2 hours. So, man, you're good. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Preach. Yeah. Preach.
You did solid, bro. It was really good. Thank you so much for coming, man. And we do hope to see you again soon, buddy.
All right. Y'all have a blessing.
Yeah, you too. All right, we're going to bring in Joseph just because he's been waiting forever and ever. We're not going to have a long conversation. I said that we won't be able to. I told him that privately. But Joseph, throw your camera on. I brought you in because we know you. You've been on this numerous times. And each week I tell you to come on earlier so we could have the conversation with you, but somebody always seems to jump in before you. But it's good to see you, buddy. How you been this week?
I've been good. My screen is pink. Is that just me or? Yeah, it is.
It's pink. Yeah. But hey, we can see it. So it doesn't matter. You might want to turn up your microphone a little bit so we can hear you a little louder.
Okay.
If not, I'll just turn mine up.
Mic check.
Perfect.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, let's try to keep this short, and then we'll pick up again next week. Hopefully, you can hop in earlier, and we can have a conversation because it's getting late and we were chatting behind the scenes. So I know you understand. But I do want to talk to you for a minute because we do enjoy your conversation. So what do you got for us tonight, Joseph?
Are you wanting to pick up where the last dude left off, or do you want to address like our topic tonight?
The topic. It's your topic. So I think that's only fair. It only makes sense to me.
Perfect.
We can go in many different directions with everything he spoke. I wrote them down too. I was just listening. I didn't have to come up today. I would have dropped down. I would just listen to his perspective and the many threads that you kind of different paths you took him on. I thought that was interesting. I wrote down some thoughts. I wrote down the questions, but we're not going to get to it. So I figured just the original topic is sufficient.
Okay. Well, it's all yours. What are your thoughts?
You said faith makes friendships fickle. I saw someone in the comments say, and this is true, anything that's emotionally charged makes any sort of relationships fickle, whether it be politics, someone go from conservative to liberal, whether it be sexual orientation. Someone can be a mother and father could love their son or their daughter. They come out the closet, so to speak, and now all of a sudden, where does animosity come from, right?
So there's no disagreement there, at least not from me. The issue isn't whether or not there are other things in the world that cause disturbances in friendships and relationships. The concern is whether or not faith is an additional thing that is unnecessary that causes friendships to have problems. So in our opinion, faith is useless. It is a method of drawing conclusions without sufficient justification. It never serves a good purpose because it doesn't depend on evidence for the conclusions that it draws. It literally just decides that something is true and becomes convinced of it. Usually because of brainwashing, upbringing, whatever you've been taught growing up, or if you've been convinced you're a sinner and you need a savior or whatever. So, and then most people have their own God and their own religious views and their own understanding of the Bible. Like the last guest we just had said he doesn't even think that the whole story of the Bible may be true. They may have gotten things wrong. Some Christians will be like, no, they have to get everything right. And so it'll just go all over the place. So by faith, you just basically make up whatever you want. And so if we're using that as a means of drawing conclusions, then now we also have tenets that we live by based upon those conclusions, and those tenets drive how we treat friendships. Like Elliott was talking to our last guest, are you telling people that they got to go to heaven? Are you helping them find a way to live forever? Are you telling people about God? Is God the foremost reason for the friendship? Is that ulterior motive? Or are you just friends because you're friends and no matter what happens, you're just going to be friends? That doesn't seem to be the norm. What the norm tends to be is once the person is no longer a Christian, you start to stray. And usually there's a condemnation of all the sins that this atheist is now doing. Eating babies is one of them. It's crazy the kinds of things that we've heard. So I'm just simply making the case that while there are other things, do we need to add to it with something called faith that is utterly useless to life? That would be my case.
I would say faith is an essential component for life. Because if someone truly has faith, then if they were truly a friend of yours to begin with, regardless of your religious beliefs, aside from any other social differences that someone might have, just specifically focused on religious, whether it be turning away from the faith. It can be someone being a Christian, but going from being raised a Baptist to being a Catholic. And that can cause a lot of division within the household, just going to a different denomination of Christianity, let alone a totally different religion itself, like being a Muslim or being a Buddhist or whatever the case may be. But if someone truly had faith, then they wouldn't disown or toss aside or treat someone who they once called a friend ill because of a decision that they chose to make. Faith would allow that person to love that person through it, even if they disagreed with it. And at the same time, not you believe what I believe for it to be a requirement to be a friend of mine. Because when I read scripture, it's all throughout the Bible. If Jesus is friends with, I guess you could say the deplorables, the tax collectors, the thieves, the murderers, even Judas himself, right? Knowing if he was to pre-foresee what Judas would do, still choosing to be his friend, if Jesus can do it, and if that story is true, then why is it difficult for Christians to do it with someone who is like they choose to be an atheist, or they choose to be Catholic instead of Baptist, they choose to be a Buddhist, or they but they turn, oh shit, I'm not straight, actually, I'm a gay guy. Whoa, that's a bad thing. Or how they treat women. So it's like, if Jesus can do it, then why can't the people who call themselves Christians can't do it?
I don't know if that's a good example, though, because depending on your other theology, Jesus could actually be the one judging them in the end and like not being their friend. I mean, Jesus is not going to let the adulterous woman get away with it. He was using that as an object lesson, but that was a sin, and God's not okay with sin. He cannot tolerate it. So, and using Judas as an example is kind of weird, because wasn't Jesus using Judas to fulfill prophecy? Knowing that he had to be betrayed. Like, I don't know if Jesus was accepting him as a friend more than he was using him as a tool.
That's an interesting perspective. I believe that it's, from my memory, that's how the Bible would give the impression that Jesus already knew he was going to do this. He allowed it to happen. Even if Jesus knew that Judas was going to do this, I'm not of the belief personally that he decided, I'm going to be his friend because I know he's going to do this, because it's going to fulfill this great prophecy. I believe Jesus it's kind of like you see someone, it's like, this person's up to no good, but I still love this person anyway. I probably shouldn't hang around them, but I want to be around them because my nature is love. And if I get harmed in the process of loving this person, which is a possibility, then I'll just take that, right? I think his love was just so great that he knew it was going to end up bad, but still, in knowing that it was going to be bad, still chose to be this man's friend regardless.
Do you believe in hell? In your theology, is hell real?
Well,
I mean, is there an eternal lake of fire where people get thrown in for not believing?
That is I personally, from my experiences, have been checked on that.
Can I just pause for a second? Can I just pause on your question, Elliott? Because I'm sorry. Yusuf,
my point is that perhaps Jesus eventually threw Judas into hell after he died, so he wasn't being his friend.
Yeah, but I'm curious. So one of the issues I have with, so you're telling me that it is a healthy relationship to befriend somebody that you know is going to stab you in the back, and you have every prophecy to tell you that, and yet you're going to still choose to be friends with this person. So my thing is, I think relationships are built on faith, and that's a poor way to build a friendship. But I don't think you have to be friends with everybody, and I think there are certain people you should not be friends with. And it seems to me that Judas was the worst type of friend that Jesus could have chosen. That does not set a good example. That makes Jesus an idiot. I just don't get this.
Well, I can say from just my personal experiences, having had a friend who I considered a friend and still do, he's made mistakes that I won't speak on, that has alienated most of our friend group, but yet I chose to remain his friend through it.
Yeah,
now,
okay, great. But you didn't know that was going to happen ahead of time.
I saw signs, but I didn't, maybe unwisely chose to continue to go through it with him. But then you see, it's like a lot of things he was going through that it came like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And I get caught in the crossfire.
I still don't see this as the same. I still don't see this as the same thing. Like you're talking about being friends with somebody who is troubled and they struggle and they make mistakes. And so you stand by them and you continue to try to work through them. Maybe there's drugs or whatever it is. They're struggling. We're talking about somebody who literally his whole purpose in life was to kill Jesus. Why would you why would you choose to be friends with somebody that their whole mission in life is to kill you? Like, people go into Witsack for that, man.
Well, it's because Jesus is using Judas. He's not his friend. He's using him for a purpose.
To my point, then, that faith makes friendships fickle. Exactly. Yeah. So this is a very dishonest friendship.
And furthermore, Jesus isn't your friend. He's your savior, and he's your judge. If I commit a crime and I go to court, if the judge is my friend, he recuses himself. The judge that replaces him is not my friend on purpose, because he's there to judge me. And in Revelation, Jesus sits on the great white throne of judgment, and he judges humans. He judges believers in a different judgment, and he judges non-believers on the great white throne. He is not these people's friends. He's their judge. So I don't know if I'd use Jesus as a good example of a friend.
I understand a lot of people see Jesus as well, most of them see him as God. I get that. I see him for what he said he is, which is very much a human, very much a brother, very much a friend, as he demonstrated to his own disciples. He considered them friends. He didn't see himself as above them. He did have more spiritual understanding, more insight that could help them elevate their spiritual growth. But
friend or teacher.
You can be both.
Or leader or Messiah. Like, if you can show me a Bible verse where Jesus says he's anyone's friend, like, I will admit I'm wrong.
I would have to go in and Google and all that, and
what was your question, Elliott? Elliott, what was your question?
My question was, was Jesus their friend, or was he their teacher when it comes to the disciples?
Well, in John 14 through 16, I think it's in 16, he says, I no longer call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. He does say that.
And the translation is actually friends.
Yeah.
Both teacher and the friend.
I'm wrong.
So he does say that. However, that being said, though they are friends, he still is their master, even though he said, I no longer call you servants, because he never once chastises them, or they're never corrected for referring to themselves as slaves of Christ in their gospels that they write, and all their books that they write. So why would you?
We'd have a philosophical disagreement on what makes a friend, because I don't think in the power dynamic of being someone's master or slave or servant or teacher or rabbi or Messiah that you could actually be their friend. I think friends have to be equals. So
right. Well, the irony of the Bible is that it uses multiple analogies referring to the same relationship a lot of times. It's really bizarre. Like, it does that with Israel. Israel is God's son. It's also God's wife. Weird as shit. And I think there's one place, I think it's his daughter too. I can't remember. But so the different analogies can refer to the same people group or people. So in this case, Jesus was drawing one particular point with his apostles because he journeyed with them, but he in no way was saying you're not actually still my slaves, because you will be for life. But he was making a point there. And so, yes, he may say the words friends, but I'm not sure where that's going. I don't see how that's also a healthy demonstration of friendship if he says you're my friends and then turns around and lets them be his slaves forever. That's just weird.
Yeah, I think this quickly becomes an extra religious philosophical debate, because I know people will call themselves friends of people that there is a power imbalance. And I mean, it's debatable whether that can be a genuine friendship. I'm not really here for that tonight.
Or even brother, right? He would call, his disciple. It depends, right? Friendship, you're right. Someone can be at one point a teacher, and then if that person gets to a certain position in terms of spiritual involvement, in this case, they would then be considered a friend, because now they're, like as you said, Elliott, they will be equals. But just like I could play the role of a friend to someone, I could also play the role of teacher to someone, play the role of brother to someone. It just depends on the person I'm speaking to. So I can understand how in the Bible it would refer to Jesus as brother, friend, teacher. Master is
definitely one of them.
Master might be, and I could be wrong, could be their version of saying teacher, like ancient language. We wouldn't say master today because of the connotations of what master means, but I believe at the time it was.
except that the alternate to the master is the slave. So you don't have a teacher and a slave.
You might be thinking more in a sense of like a sensei in a dojo is a master.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I'm making the point that the parallel party to the master teaching, the master word in the Bible when Jesus is being referred to is slave. So
he's right about that. You're right.
So that's the power dynamic there.
I am a slave of Christ. And that's,
so even though you're right, master can be used that way. That's not the way it's being used in the Bible, because there is that power.
Right.
You're right. Yeah. You're absolutely right. And I think actually that messes up the mind of a Christian who sees themselves as such as lowly slaves to Christ, and they see it as a virtue, right? I'm bowing down and kissing at his feet because the woman at the well did it. She washed his feet, and I'm supposed. So it makes them less than who I believe Christ wanted them to be, which is to be at equal footing with him spiritually. But because they make themselves so much lesser, they would never rise to where Christ wants them to be, where he's trying to get them to be.
Except in John 16, right after
me, but you want to be lesser than me. That's insane.
Except in John 16, right after he talks about that and says, "I have called you friends," and he says, "You are my friends if you do what I command you."
That's not
what. That makes no sense. So if you obey me, I'll be your friend. That's literally what he teaches in John John 16.
Is that what he teaches? Because you're right.
Yeah, it's literally that. That's verb. If I can remember the exact quote, it's a master no longer. No longer do I call you servants, because a servant does not know what his master is doing. Instead, I have called you friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. That's exactly, I think, the verse quote for. I'll double check myself.
About right. You sound about right.
Well, I know I'm right, but I'll look up the exact quote. But that is a very strange friendship. Do what I tell you, Elliott, and you'll be my friend.
That sounds like a narcissist, or it's somebody, not a good person. That's manipulation.
I don't disagree with that. But my question would then be, I can't go into it, but too much, except for, were those his words? Was it the people who heard his words? Because as you said earlier, the Bible, much of this New Testament scripture was written decades after his passing. Then if these people are interpreting in secondhand accounts, third accounts, at some point,
right,
they could be hearing it as, oh, this is what he said. But because
if he's actually God, he can say whatever he wants, and it's the truth.
I
have no problem with that. But I think Jesus is a bad comparison when the question at hand is, does faith make friendships fickle? We should probably be talking about like regular humans and not like somebody who claimed to be God, because it's going to be a totally different relationship.
Okay.
So just FYI, it's John. So it's John 15. Sorry, I was one chapter. I knew it was somewhere in those three chapters. Here's the whole passage. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and remain in his love. So you have to obey his commandments in order for him to love you. That's first what he says. Then he says, I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. If you're a slave, you'll be happy. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father I made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last, so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command: love each other. So it's a lot of really confusing.
But okay, wait. I love that you brought that scripture up, because if his only command is that you love one another, that you love each other, then now you're my friend. I believe that's a very fair compromise, in that, yeah, if you're going to be my friend, then love other people, treat them with respect, with kindness. And now I consider you my friend. If you're not, you still got a lot of learning to do, buddy. So I'm still now your teacher, to teach you how to get to that point to where you can be kind to other people, be loving to other people now. So I don't think that's not a burden of, he's not like laying down these ground rules of everything you need to do. That is love, essentially. He's saying love other people, love yourself, love God, and I too will love you. I mean, just naturally. I think that's a very reasonable compromise. He's not making it so high of a barrier for someone to leap over and say, well, you got to do X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3, like the Pharisees and Sadducees used to do. So I'm glad you brought that scripture out, because I wasn't quite
now, if
I knew it was there, but I think that's fair. I think that's
now,
actually a good scripture.
if Christians could follow that when it comes to their relationships, then their friendships wouldn't be fickle, would they?
I knew you was going to go there, and I agree.
Because as an ex-Christian atheist, I've lost every Christian friendship that I had when I was a Christian. I didn't break those friendships off. I didn't stop being their friend. They stopped being mine because I was no longer in the faith. So the faith itself made those friendships fickle, and it wasn't my fault. So that, by definition, the question on the table has to be, yes, faith does make friendships fickle. Maybe not all of them, but enough of them where we can make that statement, because they're not following Jesus' commands.
Faith, if they I'm sorry, if they had the faith that Jesus had, then that faith would not have allowed them to make that friendship with you fickle. It would have actually strengthened. So if the key is love, is not based on what you believe or don't believe, if what Jesus himself said is love other people, then you would be my friend. If your friends were truly who they were, if anything, you exposed them for who they are.
The other option is the story of Jesus is just a story, and that's why it doesn't work.
Well, no, he gave the example of what qualifies to be a friend of Christ. And people call themselves Christians, and they were following Christ, they would follow that very scripture that he said. But Alan proved the point.
If there was actual power behind the gospel, and it's my claim there isn't. The gospel has no power, therefore Jesus' recommendations and teachings don't actually work, even if they are followed.
It's just that people still have free will. They still have choice. They can believe that they're following the gospel until they put in a situation, for example, Elliott, where someone like yourself, who they perceive, everything is hunky-dory when you're following everything that they know. You're not challenging their beliefs. You're not challenging their identity until you go the opposite route. Now they actually have to put into play what Alan just spoke about, what Christ said, hey, if you love others and respect others, then I love you too, regardless of your faith or your beliefs or whatever. They didn't do it. It says more about them than it does about you, Elliott.
No, because they claim as a group, as individuals and as a group, they claim to be their lives are changed by the gospel, and this gives them the ability to live out this life in the correct way with supernatural guidance and power as new people in Christ. My claim is that's bullshit. The gospel has no power. That's why they continue to fail consistently at living out the gospel.
But not only that, hang on. So even if, let's just say the gospel's power has nothing to do with it. Let's just say, according to Jesus's words just here, the interpretation you just gave of it, the condition for Jesus to love you is that you love others. That's the condition. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you think that our love for somebody else should be contingent upon what they believe?
Should it be? No.
So if you believe something, then if I believe what I believe now and you believe what you believe now, we can still love each other, right?
Yeah.
And we should. Cool. So let me give you an example then from my life. When I was a youth pastor at a church in Florida, I became what's known as a full preterist. I believed that all the prophecies in the Bible were fulfilled in 70 AD. Just a change in belief. Nothing else. And it wasn't even like a change in lifestyle. It wasn't like I was promoting promiscuous living. I wasn't talking about, hey, teenagers, let's start.
Believed in Jesus.
I still believe Jesus. I wasn't teaching that we should steal or kill. Literally just changed my view of the end times. Like nothing big.
Okay.
The church kicked me out. Well, and in a sense they had to, because their doctrinal beliefs didn't line up with mine, even though I told him, hey, I won't teach it. I'll still teach what you guys believe here, but this is what I believe. Didn't matter. And I didn't get a chance to defend myself. I didn't get a chance to stand before the presbytery and make a defense for my case. Just, well, we already know you're wrong because the creeds tell us, and they just booted me. I wasn't allowed to say goodbye to the teens. I wasn't allowed to say goodbye to people in the church. They ousted me like fast, like that. Like it was a crazy thing. It was like they treated me like I had raped a girl or something. That was really weird, dude. And literally that's all it was, just a change in beliefs. They made a public statement to the church about all the things that I supposedly believed, which none of it was true because they were trying to say what I believed and never asked me what I believed. So it was just really weird stuff. And then I got a lot of hate mail from people in the congregation telling me, I want you to unfriend my teen. Don't ever talk to us again, like stuff like that. It's fine. It's over. I mean, it's years and years ago. So I'm like, well over it. But I'm telling you all this to make a point, bring home an example. Do you think that they did the loving thing?
Man, dude, I'm getting chills, man, hearing that. That is extremely disturbing. Well, obviously that's my answer, right? Even if your belief radically changed,
was that the loving thing to do?
certainly not what Christ would have did. But I understand why someone would say, screw Christ, screw the Bible. I have not met one single Christian who actually followed this Christ that is portrayed in the scripture you just gave. Because when you have that many people, not even one person had did what Christ did in that one scripture alone. Well, if you love others, then I love you too. That would make me absolutely infurious with Christians, with any religion, with God. It hasn't happened to me, not to that extent, but that is extreme. That is traumatic.
But to the point, the condition of Christ is, if you love others, then I'll love you. If they didn't love me correctly, then does that mean Christ doesn't love anybody in that church?
He I would say he loves even now, but in terms of as a friend, which was the point, right? As an equal, so to speak, you're a friend, you're an equal. I love you in that way, but these people still need to be taught how to first love other people. Because if they can't do that even with you, then they can't be considered a friend. They would still be under a student-teacher dynamic. They still have a lot to learn.
But didn't Jesus say,
wow,
I love, if you love others, then my love will abide with you. Like the exact teaching he was telling them there, that this is the condition. I will love you if you love others. And if they're not doing that, then how can we guarantee that Christ loves anybody? How can you tell anymore who Christ actually loves and who he doesn't based upon how Christians act? This is going to be a problem, because now there's no way to know if Christ loves me, because what if today I don't love correctly? Shit. What do you do?
But what is loving correctly, right? I mean, everyone has ups and downs.
Exactly. What is right? What is loving Christ? So again, this brings up more problems. It's like this teaching is so vague and so useless. Like he just says, if you obey my commands, okay, and then he says the command is love one another. That's not helpful, because I mean, what does that even look like? We have no freaking clue.
I can give one example that he pointed out in scripture that I've seen in these particular individuals, and that's just children, right? If you say, if you love, something to the effect of you love like little children do, obviously not the mentality, not the immaturity, but the love.
That's have faith.
Innocence.
That's have faith like a little child, not love like a little child. But
oh no, you're right. You're absolutely right. So when I spoke about faith being the foundation of love itself, if I have faith in something or someone, I love that person. They might not have accomplished that thing, or I might not have a lot of evidence of that thing, but I love this person. I have faith in you. Right? I love you because I have faith you're going to get to where you're going to go. I believe in you. So that is a source of love. So having faith like a little child, children have a lot of faith until they're given reasons not to have faith, which they learn, unfortunately, as they get older. But that's love.
But back to
They have
the
faith, I'm
love
not gonna
thing.
hurt them.
Back to the love thing here, though, is like we don't know if we're loving good enough to stay and abide in Christ's love, because that whole church thought they did the loving thing. You don't think they did the loving thing. I don't think I did the loving thing. Who the hell knows what the loving thing is in that circumstance? Only Jesus knows. So we can't know if Christ still loves them or doesn't love them or not. Or maybe he doesn't love me anymore because I'm now an atheist.
Well,
Like there's no way of knowing.
Oh,
So the
it's worse
problem
than that.
is that makes the friendship with Christ fickle, because we can't possibly know whether he loves us or not. Elliott?
It's worse than that, because a lot of Christians would say the loving thing to do was to excommunicate you,
Sure.
so that you would find your way back to the truth.
Certainly.
So it depends on the day of the week, the random Christian you're talking to, the mood they're in. Like this is anybody's ball game. It is a mess. This is the problem with taking an old book and there's nobody to explain it to us, no God to explain it to us. So we have thousands of humans to explain it to us. Go into any bookstore. I've got a picture from a used bookstore the last time I was in the city. It was a Christian section, and it had hundreds and maybe thousands of books. And the title up top was Christian Living. And it was like, how many words can you write about a finite book? I mean, there's only like 900 pages in the Bible, but we've written thousands of books about it instead of letting it speak for itself, because we don't know what the fuck it's talking about. So I would throw the book out and just live my life.
It's much to chew on, but you know what? We have to draw this to a conclusion because we can't keep going all night. But hang on, let me just make a couple quick announcements, and then Joseph, I'll give you the floor to just kind of like wrap up tonight a little bit, because I did say it was going to be short and we went much longer than I was expecting. So just real quick, everybody, just some things that are coming up. This is some good stuff this week. Let's talk on Sunday, right here on Skeptic Haven. Jesus Took the Wheel and Crashed My Car with Chad and Helen. Be sure to call in if you're interested in that conversation. That's at 7 p.m. Central. Next Tuesday at 6 p.m. with Elliott and I. That topic is family life is healthier without God. That'll be a fun conversation. We do hope, Joseph, you need to call in for that one, man. To hop in the room earlier. That'll be a fun conversation. Family life is healthier without God. So that's coming up. And then next Wednesday nights, right after the show, on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, I am having a debate with Tristan Gabriel over on 21st Century Mind. The question is Tristan Gabriel an atheist? I'm taking the affirmative. He's taking the negative. So this is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be an open conversation. Tristan and I are friends. He does not think he's an atheist. I think he is. So we're going to have a very fun conversation. And the whole point of this is for those people who have left theism but aren't quite sure where they land. A lot of people are afraid of this word atheist, and they think there's more to atheism than just what I'm going to argue for. So I suggest if you're like in this no man's land, you're like, I'm not a theist, but I don't know what I am. This is a debate you need to come to, because I'm going to be bringing a lot of clarity to this word and what it means. And I'm going to demonstrate that Tristan actually is an atheist. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So that's next Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. Check out 21st Century Mind. I will put the link in our episode next Tuesday, and I guess I'll throw it in this one too after the show is over. I just don't have it in there right now. And then don't forget Unravelation series that I'm doing on Mondays and Thursdays, how those of faith find freedom. These episodes correlate with the Deconversionists each week, so make sure you check that out. Go to the Unraveler AB and make sure you subscribe and check out those episodes. They're about 8 to 12 minutes each episode. So do that. Link is in the info. Make sure you check that out. Don't forget to join us on Deconversion Nation on Facebook. It is a great place to come and continue this conversation and have dialogue between theists and atheists. It's a really friendly environment. So we hope you'll come. If you're a Christian, ask questions, get answers directly from atheists, not what people tell you atheists say. And there's a lineup for the whole week. So that's what's happening right now on Skeptic Haven and around the globe, at least as far as we are concerned. So that's it for announcements. Joseph, why don't you go ahead and give us your thoughts to kind of end things, and then I'll let Elliott, and then I'll just end the night.
Prove that faith makes friendships fickle. And I'm sure, listen, I've seen, not even just with you, dude, I've spoken It is so sad. I've spoken to literally, I guess, undercover gay people in church, and they'll pull me aside because they sense that I won't judge them for some reason, like I do to others, and they'll confide in me in a whisper tone. Yeah, I really like the music. I like the people, but if I was to speak out about this, they wouldn't like me. But for some reason, I feel comfortable telling you about this. So atheists, women who want to, achieve a higher position, they feel like they're being stifled because of what scripture says they can or cannot do. Women aren't allowed to do this or not allowed to do that. But we're not sexist. Gay people can do this, they can do that. They can sing in a church, but you can't hold a position here. Atheists, yeah, you're welcome to come so we can eventually convert you. We'll pretend to be your friend, but we'll call you a friend, we'll pretend. But if you eventually don't come around to actually believing as we do, or getting it together, we're going to drop you like a hot potato. Even worse, if you were a Christian and they found out it's almost like they feel like you betrayed them. Right. So faith makes friendships very fickle, in the same way that a lot of Christians would say, I would do this and that. If something, I would proclaim my faith, and if someone pointed a gun to my head, if I was in a situation where a machete was being put to my family's neck. But you most likely probably would disown it and say, yes, I'm a Muslim. If you were put in the same situation as those people in Africa who I consider to be actual Christians, if anything. But the Christians here, they think they're giving up their life for anything. They're not giving up for nothing. So when something like an atheist diverts from the faith, that is akin to them fighting against the demon, against principalities of evil. You are now like an infection, and we got to cut out the wound and excommunicate you. But we love you though. We love you with all our house, and Jesus loves you, but we don't love you. So we'll say Jesus loves you. Jesus loves you. Jesus loves you, Alan. But be on your way. I'll leave with this. I got some people, Jehovah's Witness, they come knocking on my door. They used to, for maybe the last 3 or 4 years. I like them. I like them a lot. It was a man or husband, a wife, and his 2 sons. I grew to like them. The sons, watching them grow up. And then one day I decided, okay, I don't think he's getting the hint that I'm never, ever going to become a Jehovah's Witness, but I'm going to test it. I'm hoping that he'll still come around. So, but I can't put it off any longer. I'm going to declare in his own church. I even went to his church. I forgot what they call it, but it's their church version. And I told him in front of all his friends and buddies, yes, I like him. I like his family. I love them. I actually love them. That's why I'm here to support them. Even though I knew I'm never going to convert. So I made sure he heard it. I made sure everyone heard it. I'm never, ever going to convert, but I'm more than happy to come to your service because I love you guys. I haven't seen him since. It's been a couple of months. Now that is a very mild version of what happened to me compared to Alan. So I wasn't, that is a stream. But to me, that was like, I see. So all that, hey, come on now, brother, come on now. We love you. We want to, was it really love? It was conditional. But they don't understand. They think it's love by not allowing me to be a part of that community, which I would have been happy to do. Just don't try to convert me into anything that you believe. That's conditional, fine. But I can't be a part of that. So you stood on your principles, Alan. You stood on them. You could have easily decided, you know what, this atheist thing, I'm comfortable with these friends that I made, these people, I'm just going to go back and do that. Gay people do that. They've done that. I was, but I'm not gay no more. No, you can't just not be that. So you'll deny yourself and your truth and loving yourself so other people can love you. But in the process of doing that, destroying yourself, your character, your spirit, and those people end up doing harm to themselves because of that. Because they're always looking for this approval that doesn't exist from people. Unfortunately, and I'll leave on this, we all find out in life that this faith that we think is the cornerstone of our life, when it gets dismantled, it causes incredible disillusionment and a lot of anger and a lot of hate, not necessarily for the people who excommunicated you, but for the system itself, for what it represents, even God himself. So I understand why you in that position. I understand, Elliott, why you're in that position, and other atheists I spoke to. I get why they would leave. And I would say the answer was never in the church to begin with. The answer was always to go directly to God. But the mistake that we make, the part that we play in this, is that we go to other people thinking that God is in all these people who claim to know God, who claim to love their neighbor, until they're in a position where they actually have to love their neighbor. Oh, wait. We'll make a condition on that one. You can just kind of scoot aside because, well, we love you, right? It's the facade of everything. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is. So what's the solution? For me, it was God. That's it, going straight to the source. And in that, I can love those who don't love me as much as I love them. That's where I get the strength to do that from. That's it. That's all I got. And I appreciate you guys having me up tonight. This has been a great conversation.
Absolutely, it has been. And just for the record, that incident was not the reason I left Christianity. No incidents like that where I planted a whole church and hung on for 10 more years after that. It was nothing to do with it. I tried to go to God and God just wasn't there anymore. And that's why I left Christianity, because I just couldn't, I was no longer convinced God exists because he just there's no good reason to think he was there. He never talked back to me. In fact, I lost my faith in the middle of a prayer. That's how it ended for me. So, when people say, well, you got to seek God and talk to God and look for him, I'm like, I was freaking praying to him in the middle of that prayer is when I just lost my faith. And I was like, what the hell am I doing? So anyway, I didn't mean to go on a rant, but I just wanted you to know that incident had nothing to do with me departing Christianity at all. I hung on pretty good, man. I've been mistreated a lot in Christianity because of different reasons, but I still believed in God's glory and fought hard for it all the way to the end. So that wasn't anything to do with it. But anyway, Elliott, I told you you'd have the last word on this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just end with this. Atheism leaves no room for excuses. So if you have a Christian who is a fickle friend, they will make up rationalizations for it. But an atheist has to own it.
Accountability. Taking accountability for your own decisions. Instead of saying, well, God wouldn't want me to be your friend. It's no, you don't want to be my friend. Well, God told me to love you. Wait, but do you love me? Or are you doing it? You loving me because God's telling you to love me. So do you really love me? It's all these weird gymnastics that
I don't have
to play.
As an atheist, I don't have the God excuse for anything. I have to own my decisions. So if I stop being your friend, it's because I have to make that decision for myself. I'm not going to throw it off on Jesus.
Right. You don't break up with the girlfriend because of God anymore. I used to do that. Anyway, Joseph, I personally think you're more moral than the Bible itself. So I think you'd be a much better person without having to rely on it and trying to go to it and trying to make excuses for stuff. Dude, you have a far better head on your shoulders than you give yourself credit for.
I would rather have you as a friend than Jesus.
Any day of the week.
Because at least you exist.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. You exist, and also I don't have to question whether or not you love me the next day because of my beliefs. Crazy. Anyway,
one more thing. Hold on, just one quick. I would say if Jesus did exist, you would be his best friend, because I believe Jesus would see you atheists as you guys are reasonable. You're logical. You're rational. Unlike a lot of these Christians who claim to know.
That's not going to save me from hell. Yeah, it's not going to save me from hell. The Jesus that I know in the Bible is going to throw me right into the lake of fire for not believing that he was God. So it doesn't matter how rational he thinks I am. I'm still cursed.
Oh, he doesn't.
If we can get past that, then Jesus and I can be friends. But if Jesus is going to throw me in the lake of fire, we cannot be friends.
If you want to know, no, that's too far. That's too far. This is going to sound crazy, but let's just say the Jesus that people are expecting to come back 2,000 years, I would argue that he's already here, and not in a cult-like way, not in the drinking the Kool-Aid way, not in the John that's in Brazil way, or this is the guy. And that's what I'm saying. The things he was saying about atheists is like, whoa, these atheists will love you, because he agrees with a lot of the things y'all talk about.
I tell you,
the Bible, the real guy.
Let's hold that thought.
That's a whole different thing, though.
Let's hold that thought. You can come back next week and we'll talk about Jesus and what he's supposed to appear as on earth. But
sounds good.
I think we got around this out. We're almost 3 hours.
But that was fun. Joseph, thanks for joining us. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
It's fun.
Y'all, remember, everybody, every Christian has their own version of Christianity. We're here to unravel your conversion. Have a great night, everybody.